Hello and welcome to a video unlike what I usually do. Um, I am probably not playing in next month's GP, in the GP for December 2025. So I thought that now would be a great time to look back at my time with Revolution Custom Standard. Um, so Revolution, like the past year and a bit of Revolution, has been like by far the most Magic I've played in my life. Like I played a tiny bit of draft back in high school. I drafted on Arena. I got into that in university draft, like right around Neon Dynasty, Dominaria United, that time period, and I got pretty good at that. I found a local cube group that's been a lot of fun. I've drafted a lot of them, um, but uh, Revolution is really my only experience with Constructed, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's been a big part of my life for the last year, and I'm really grateful for it. And since I'm probably taking next month off, let's take a trip down memory lane. But instead of taking that trip down memory lane in chronological order, I'm going to do it in order from the worst deck I've ever brought to a GP to the best deck. So that's 14 decks because I started in second month of Cliques of Nylon. So I played for second month of Cliques of Nylon, then third month, then the Eternal GP, then all 3 months of Chiku Chaos Reigns, and then the Plane Chase GP, all 3 months of Errors in the Weft / Ketsu Dusk of Time, and then the Brawl GP, and then and then the first all three standard months of Exalted Triltry. So that's 14 in total. I started um, October of last year and just finished up November of this year. So I'm evaluating these decks based on how good they were relative to the field that they played against. Uh, like the decks that actually, basically the decks that also showed up to that tournament. Not not each other, because like the power level of the format has fluctuated wildly over this time, and also not against kind of the theoretical best meta of the month. Like I'm not evaluating things on their ability to beat the All Who Wander's 100 Relentless Bats deck, because even though it was legal for like a year, uh, All Who Wander only played it for, it was only played once in the Brawl GP. And I'm just going to take the time to reminisce about my time with Revolution Custom Standard. Starting with February 2025, second month of Chiku Chaos Reigns. And the story behind this is I was going to play Extraction Ritual Extraction Mission, the deck I call Extraction Missual. Um, and that deck looked really good until it got emergency banned right before the GP. So I kind of took a last minute audible into Relentless Bats. Cool Beans, I think, put me on the Relentless Bats idea. 17 Relentless Bats, pumps them with Silence the Opposition Authoritarianism, pumps them with Chemis Central Intelligence. This is back when Bats was 4 less if you controlled a creature named Relentless Bats. So if you played one Relentless Bats from hand, you could get back all of them from your graveyard. Laser Ruin could also target yourself, so you could use this to mill yourself Phoenix's Judgment and Festered Effluvium as well. Very simple deck. This was by definitely not the best deck in the tournament. You can see it's down here at the 14 of 14. This was Chiku Chaos Reigns, so Aqua Crew was running around, Scofa was running around, people were ramping into Chronicles on turn 6, stuff like kind of it was the era of graveyard control. And this was, I mean, it used some of the same tools, but it was definitely not the same deck. Pre-nerf redeveloped Cityscape as well. I do want to call attention to the sideboard plan because it's my favorite moment with this deck. This deck did not make top cut, but it did play against Scribble, who had 4 copies of Forget Their Names, the surgical extraction, in their sideboard, and I managed to side out all of the nearly all the relentless bats, putting in Dissect Intel, Data Weaver, Phoenix, and Earthly Penchants, and becoming this weird blue-black integrate mill deck that actually managed to win post-board games and knock Scribble out of the tournament. That was hilarious. Bats beating 4 times. Forget Their Names. Yeah, this deck was like it was pretty simple, straightforward. Um, and Bats got nerfed afterwards. I can take responsibility for that at least. But going from kind of this one-off, kind of audible last-minute deck change to My very first deck, October 2024. So I found the format in like September 2024, but the GP had already started. So I started playing around in League, and All Who Wander had this Esper control deck built around Ifara that looked really cool. So I decided I'd take that and start refining it. And like, oh, I want some more card draws. I put in Soviet Audi. Its deck had Storm Scraper as its finisher, which typically had ward very large number because it's almost all enchantments in here. Could take advantage of Afara's Judgment. Had Banish the Eye, which you could copy with Storm Scraper. Omen of Deception, Omen of Slaughter, Seal Away is answers that trigger Afara. Feast of Whispered Knives, which you can get with which you can repeatedly trigger with Demographer or Ifara or Sovius Adi. Um, Fall of Bergenon, this was kind of my innovation. Was like this was the 5 mana sweeper that could also hit planeswalkers. Um, so it was kind of my sweeper of choice. Uh, and this actually made Top Cut. I made Top Cut in my very first month. I was quite happy with that. Uh, this was definitely not the best thing going on. I think Golden Age had just been nerfed. I forget what the actual best thing in this was. Oh, I think it might have just been Integrate. Yeah, this was. I think Integrate won this tournament. When under Split Moon, that was cool. I was not on this. This was a fine deck. I think maybe like middle of the pack as far as the power level goes. Featuring my signature sideboard creatures in control deck. This deck is effectively creatureless because I don't care if Demographer gets hit by removal and Stormcreeper has hexproof, but I can side in Dormant Monstrosity against other control decks to give a threat that they kind of sided out their answers to. 100 Head and Pillars was a really powerful creature land. Yeah, and I love control. Haven't got to play it enough recently, and this was a great introduction to the format. I'm glad I did well with it. I don't know if I'd have stuck around if I O2'd with this thing. In fact, I ran it back the very next month. So this deck, this is basically, that was V4 or something, V5. This is a couple more versions down the line. This is essentially the same deck. I'm just going over the changes. Soviet's Adi is out, and Conistone is in. The Conistone is like Soviet's Adi, except it can't be attacked. Um, I just found I was never using the Edict mode on Soviet's Adi. Demographer is out. Phoenix's Touch is in. That's just an upgrade. I don't know why I was on Demographer before. This is a trigger the Fara. It can still activate Feast of Whispered Knives. And it's kind of and it's much more of a card advantage card, which this deck is looking for. And the mana base. I actually ran some simulations and discovered that Pool of Light and Gloomcover Skep, the Duels of Varro check lands, they actually just weren't that good in a 3-color deck. You should instead just be on full Readable Cityscape. Remember, this is pre-nerf Cityscape that can exile any card from your hand. Nascent Light Vein, easy 3-color mana in a slow deck that has expensive cards. And I just played 200 Pillars, 2 Gates of the Underworld, 2 Temple of Deceit as my tap lands, and then just all basics and rainbow lands. Yep, this didn't do as well. I think after this I started branching out a little more from my comfortable control space, but I still think this deck was like pretty solid into its meta. Next, we come to. So I've won 4 GPs of the 14 I've entered, and this is one of them. You might be surprised to see a deck that won its GP down here at 11 out of 14. This is Death by Jellyfish. This is a Boro deck. So the story behind this is I had just come off winning my first standard GP, and Errors in the Weft was in the format, and I wanted to kind of goof off a little and try out some Errors in the Weft cards that I thought weren't getting a fair shake. So I wanted to see if Boro was good. I wanted to blink it with Soul Space Refit. While I was there, I could blink Architect of the Intangible, Agent of Deception, Preemption Demon, even Exorcist of Errors. Jetstream Cruiser was recently buffed, was buffed this month, and I thought this card looked like a really good kind of tempo finisher. This is a weird deck. It's kind of a tempo deck, but it doesn't have aggressive 1-drops or like cheap creatures to apply pressure early. But it's also kind of not a control deck. Although it's very interaction heavy, a lot of the interactions kind of taxing, like Preemption Demon, like Agent Deception and just don't hold them off forever. But I mean, this is the kind of thing I love to play. Yeah, one thing you'll notice is that I have a weakness for certain things, and one of them is putting lots of interaction in my deck. And so, like, this deck is almost all interaction. And Receive, which, maybe not the best 1-drop. I certainly could have been running Phoenix's Touch here, but You could get it back with Architects the Intangible. It wasn't a completely ridiculous thing to play in here. Uh, Sideboard had the click. Oh, right, main deck Duress. This was the time when the premier aggro deck was tokens, and so it had very few actual creatures. You could just put main deck Duress, and it was good against everyone. I think I got pretty lucky to win a GP with this deck. It's not bad. I think it's a pretty solid deck. I haven't registered any bad decks, but it was like there was a lot more powerful things going on in this GP. Although I will say July 2025, third month of Era's Kitsuo, I think it's my favorite meta Revolution's ever had. This was right after Cyberos buffs, but those Cyberos were pretty light. Um, Golems had just been nerfed and wasn't that good. And so there wasn't a clear best deck. Like I won with this. There was aggro, there was mid range, there was control. I'm sure like if we played that meta over and over again for a couple more months, we'd discover a new best deck. But it felt very diverse, very open. In a way that kind of more so than any other meta. I think every other meta, every standard meta, in retrospect, it's clear what the best deck or the best few decks were. July 2025? I'm still not sure. Next up, oh right, this thing. This is Brawl Month. This is also a GP winner. This is the Weft Heart. So this is Brawl. So I have a commander, and I have no sideboard, and I have a 60 card singleton deck. And this was, I just talked about the last GP being diverse. In this GP, I think a lot of people did not, were not playing the most powerful deck in the field was not on their top of their priority list. Like, everyone was afraid of Ephemia. I was scared of Ephemia too, but there was only one Ephemia player PTM. And I was actually practicing Ephemia for a while before I realized I think Weft Heart is actually better. I thought Weft Heart had a good matchup into Ephemia. And I'm so glad I did, because this GP ended up having every single player was on a different commander, and I was the only one, not only the only one on Weft Heart, but the only one on a commander from Errors in the Weft. And I ended up winning the whole thing. This is just a value mid-range deck. Put in value 2-mana enchantments like Menelaya or Equinox Mark or Dryad of the Keen-Eyed or Flags on High, and then sack them to go get Fabricated Anomaly, and then use that to go get Panic, and then use that to go get Thraxes. It's also just like a good red-green mid-range deck. That's another one of my deck building weaknesses. I love building just like mid-range decks with lots of value and a big variety of effects. I love Singleton. This is kind of like I was a draft player first, as I said. And this felt a lot like draft in that you're kind of both some flavor of mid-range and you're kind of throwing cards at each other, and each uses a beatdown sometimes, and you're trying to get the most value possible out of each of your cards. Command just kind of throws that off a little by kind of giving you this infinite mana sink. So many of these cards performed so well. It has all the hits: Igneous Visions, Abominable Avalanche, Terminal Impact. There's two great stories from this run, which you can watch the videos. But in quarterfinals, I was against All Who Wander, and I managed. This was like a huge mid-range value fest, and I managed to get exact lethal from 21. Attack with Thraxes, put a counter on it with Fabricated Anomaly, then post-combat Terminal Impact for 15, which was exactly lethal. I actually think All Wander could have played around it, but just wasn't expecting lethal from 21. In the finals against PTM, who was on Ephemia, as I said, PTM flooded out the worst I've ever seen anyone flood out, just like 12 lands or something in a very land-light deck. And that's my latest GP win, actually, as of currently speaking. Next up, okay, we're kind of telling this story in reverse order because this is the third month of GQ Chaos Reigns, and GQ Chaos Reigns. I feel like each other format, like Earth and West format, Twill Tree format, Face of Nyland format, they had different decks, different kind of archetypes being the best over the course of their history. But for GQ Chaos Reigns, I feel like kind of the Skosa, Aqua Crew space of graveyard control decks was kind of the thing to do for the entire run of GQ Chaos Reigns. So this is post first nerf Aqua Crew. So currently Aqua Crew says triggers only once unless you control Warden of Depth. At the time, it was triggers only once each turn. And so even after its first nerf, I thought this card was pretty good. Brought it back to trigger it with Root Fossil and All That Remains, and Seafloor Treasures and Harvest Time. Um, also had Skosa. This was Skosa back when instead of return a permanent card of mana value 3 or less, it was untap all of your lands. So it was just free. That was pretty ridiculous. The reason this deck is kind of in the bottom half is although this archetype was good, the better version of this deck, which Ricky Racer was on and like had a crazy run that season, was the all-in like 4 Scosa, 4 Cryptolab, 4 Chronicle Extinction, even playing the Green Chronicle, kind of more less cheap interaction, more just ramp into giant haymakers. Like as I said before, I have a weakness for cheap interaction, especially Refract. I love this card. I still love it. I think this like the credit always goes to redeploy and own reception. I think Refract might be in a vacuum the best quench the format's ever had. Looking at their hand is so important and so valuable. And look, I even had Rabora's Appetite for more interaction, making this to more of a control deck. Um, Invasion Zen, that boy, I love that card. You can Invasion Zen, put Defender counter under Aqua Crew, it can still turn their stuff into islands. Yeah, his deck was good. It wasn't the best. I didn't win because I think like the interaction was just less good than hitting your opponent with Skosa more often. Uh, but I recall this did pretty well. Next up, this is the deck that I had the hardest time placing on this tier list because on one hand, this is Rib Combo. So this is back when Rib Collector was 1 mana and it wandered for 2 mana. Back when Transgressive Trendsetter didn't say if it was cast. Back when Masksmith could cash cards from your graveyard or even itself. Back when where is it? Ozen's Blessing was just a tutor that grabbed any 2-drop out of your deck and put it onto the battlefield. This was the best deck in the format. The curators did know about Trendsetter combo. At least they knew about part of it before, like during the initial kind of rework wave for Errors in the Weft, and they decided to take a punt on it. And in retrospect, that might not have been a great idea. I mean, to be fair, only 2 people brought this deck to the tournament. It was me and Lee. Lee built the deck, and I kind of tinkered with it, mostly for the worst. This is why I think this is in the bottom half. Even though this was the best archetype, this is not a very good build of it. I only have 3 Spirit Realm done. I should be on the full 4. I only have 2 Audacious Rough Rider. I should have more of those. I'm on 3 Smiling Sludge for no reason. Another thing you'll see is like a big weakness of me is when I have a tutor in my deck, I keep convincing myself to put in kind of marginal tutor targets that I never get. And that in Smiling Sludge and Karaja were those in this deck. Exorcist and Masksmith are a little more justifiable. But this deck was just like a slightly slower, slightly less consistent version, and actually went 0-2. This is the worst performance of any deck I've ever run. This is the only ever time I went 0-2. I don't even know if I've gone 1-2. It's just 0-2 and 2-2 and better. Oh, and this deck list name, I'm crediting Lee here, and also each one of these phrases references a card in the deck. So always smiling is Smiling Sludge. So good you'll be coming back for seconds is Serve Again. It's a little overwrought as a joke, but I think it was fun. But yeah, would have been great to pull off a win in the first month of Errors in the Weft, but Peacock ended up getting it, taking out Lee in the finals, which that was a great narrative too. Anyways, right. So we're in the top half now. That was the first 7 decks, and now we are into the top 7 decks. And these top 7 decks, for each of them, I think I had the best deck in the field. I was the best deck in the field. This is Mr. Smith's Lightspeed Odyssey, and this is my first GP win, and it's Plain Chase. This is a Savvy Smith deck. It has Savvy Smith and Covetous Frostworm and Lightspeed Launcher and Research Grant, all of which kind of pay you off for casting lots of dinky instant sorceries. Industrialize and Igneous Visions are the best of them because you can cast them twice. Also has Ebb and Flow. High Voltage usually costs 1. Firebolt. Punishment from Nyx. Finish off of Terminal Impact, Light Vein Arrow. This wasn't known archetype. It was known to be decent, not great. And what I realized was this deck gets to play some of the best planes. Like, it gets to leverage planes that are really good for it. Tower of the Tech Magi, making all of your instant sorceries free. Kaiwan's Testing Ground, giving you a ton of drakes. Courier's Station, got a lot of instants, so you can disturb the peace consistently. You draw lots of cards for Golden Palace and Eltenzia's Toll. Covetous Frostform is a dragon, so you can use Carsey's Spine. Den of the First Dream lets you go off and just burn your opponent out. This deck kind of like, you could mid-range them out with Savvy Smith and Covetous Frostform, or you could just transition into a burn plan of Terminal Impact and all the other burn spells. Uh, yeah, like, right. Just to put in perspective, I won with this deck in the same month. Like, I won the GP with this deck, my first ever GP win, in the same month that Airs in the West was accepted in the format. So that was a big month for me, April 2025. And the idea behind this deck was, if if you just end up on a random plane that doesn't affect either of you that much, you just play a below average standard deck. But if you end up on one of your 4 god planes, then you just win the game. You get to do something ridiculously powerful. And I was in the finals against Ricky Rister, who was like going for a 3 in the row and had normal green black graveyard shenanigans. And like one game we played a normal game and I lost. One game we played a normal game and I won. And one game we ended up on, I think it was Tower of the Tech Magi, and I completely went off and won the game. I ended up on Tower of the Tech Magi a lot during this tournament, which certainly helped. More Invasions, and once again, that was my signature card for a while. I know Plane Chase is divisive. I know a lot of people don't like it. I really love Plane Chase. It's exactly the right combination of really technical and difficult, like deciding whether you should roll the plane or die, and if so, when during your turn to do it is really difficult. You have to look at what are all the possible outcomes, what are all the other planes you could get to if you roll, and how good are each of those planes for you. But also, you could just like lose to variance a lot, like good like 15% of the games, you just have no chance of winning because you end up on Kaiwan's Testing Grounds against this deck, and you can't roll Plane Chase to get off of it, and your opponent gets 5 Drakes by turn 3, and you lose. So, great fun for me, especially because I was winning a lot. But I even designed the planes for Airs in the West, never got to use them because like it was this month. I was like just slightly too late. So yeah, I think this was the best deck in the tournament by a very small margin. Also, the best deck in the tournament by a small margin, Golems. Now, this is the best deck in the tournament. This was June 2025, so this was second month of Airs in the West Kitsua Dusk of Time. Um, so, as I said, in the first month, I bombed out O2 with that Rib Collector combo deck. And so I decided to experiment around in League, and I discovered that, hey, you know these golems that have already been nerfed once at this point? There have been 3 golem nerfs. This was after the first one, but before the second one. They're still pretty good. Back when Speaking Titan, all of them said can't attack or block unless you control 3 golems, just any 3 golems, and on Speaking Titan was a 3/4. Um, and once again, Odin's Blessing could search up Unspeaking Titan, or here you see my weakness for having uh, big toolboxes: Architect, Exorcist, Agent, or Masksmith. Um, so the reason this was only the best deck by a small margin is because there were like 3 other Golems players in this tournament. The Secret was fully out, and Golems was definitely the best thing to be doing in this tournament. I think this was the best build of Golems because it was good in the Golems mirror, because it had more interaction. It had Omen of Deception and Hang. These Root Fossils weren't great, but they could kind of win a more mid-range game if all the Golems got answered. You could get Exorcist to exile their golems. I think other people had more all-in golems that were more explosive when they did work. Like I think the finals was, I think, against a different golems player who was on Extraction Mission, which was like a 4-color golems deck that could Extraction Mission golems and thereby get a lot more golems at once, but gave up a lot of the interaction. Boy, here you see 2 of my big weaknesses: cheap interaction and toolboxes. But I think it was actually at least partially right in this case. Yeah. Oh, and a Vert Disaster. Right, there were ramp decks in this format, so I have a Vert Disaster. This was my first standard GP win. And after this, Golems got nerfed, but they were not by any means gone. We'll see them again later. Next up, it's the deck I'm running this month. It's Toy Soldiers. This is Envoy the Fallen Karina substitute combo. If you have 2 substitutes in graveyard and cast an Envoy, or 1 sub in graveyard, 1 Envoy in battlefield, cast a substitute, you win the game on the spot. To find those, we have Venture Capitalist to search out substitute, Anomaly, Ignited Soul, Art Stellar Journal, Alcaric Obelisk, all that remains to dig, Herald of Awakening. This is a bad card. I should not have Herald of Awakening in my main deck. I probably shouldn't have it in my 75. This should probably be either second Whitecliff Pilgrim or um, Serrated Fossil. It's probably the answer. It's also possible with Program Tour with a bad idea, although Program Tour is a little more defensible. This is right after you've just seen. If you're watching as this is released, you've just seen me get to finals of this deck and then lose to Lee on a different Envoy deck. Even though I lost, I think that Envoy was clearly the best thing to be doing this month, and this is the better version of Envoy because it's better in the Envoy mirror. It has extra spheres to take their Envoy, which is really the only good answer to Envoy. It's already been revealed in chat that this thing is going to get nerfed, and boy, does it deserve it. It's not the most powerful thing Rev's ever had, but it's certainly quite powerful. Yeah, I love building kind of mid range decks with combo finishes. You saw that was kind of a weakness of mine back with Rib Combo, where I tried to tilt it in a more mid range direction with the Smiling Sludges instead of committing hard to the combo. Here, I think being mid range was actually a good idea because there was kind of synergy between Excess Bears and Substitute and Anomaly and the combo, and so you kind of justify playing these mid range cards in this otherwise more combo centric deck. Um, Lots of really interesting tech in the sideboard, like the Absentias, which were there to beat Husk Forger decks and also be good against um, Aristocrats, where a lot of their key threats are 2-mana creatures. Feed to the Crimson Pact was a great kind of get, where I realized that a bunch of people aren't playing removal that can hit this. So what if they side in kind of their own graveyard hate, you can side in this and be more of a mid-range deck. That plan worked out great. Uh, yeah. I think I was favored in that finals, and I think I was favored against pretty much everyone in that tournament. Maybe some of the white base control decks can put up a decent fight, but even against them, um, this deck is pretty good. Uh, uh, and you can see how far I've come as a deck builder. Kind of like compared to my earlier decks, a lot more four ofs, a lot more confident game plan here. Um, Still a weakness for toolboxes. Look at you, Herald of Awakening. But better than that was my deck from last month. This is October 2025, second month of Twiltry. Spore Spawning. This is back when Spore Spawning said permanent card in your graveyard or in exile, and the flashback was just 3 and a green, no additional cost. I think of all the decks I've run, as I said, limited player, big love for mid range, and I think this is the most fun I've ever had playing a deck. This thing was so just like it had so many different plans. You could go early Redeemer to set up a big spore spawning. You could ramp into Aurora and just get tons of lands into play for terminal impact. You could just play a fair mid-range plan. Husk Forger into Redeemer into Yen Slopeskitter was plenty good. I think this deck was so Lee once again was also on a version of this deck. Lee's version was heavier on the Aurora, so like more committed to the spore spawning, less good at fighting through graveyard hate. Had like Cruxes in the sideboard. Whereas mine was more of a mid-range deck that could get to the spore spawning plan pretty often. I think I was generally more favored against the field, but was worse in the mirror. And in fact against Lee in the mirror that I lost. Kind of just playing, yeah, this deck got to play the kind of mid-range core of Abominable Avalanche, Terminal Impact, Husk Forger, Redeemer, Fabricated Anomaly. Which is just such a solid core to build around. Um, Crumbling Tower. Lee also had Crumbling Towers. Those were a great mirror breaker. I love playing a deck of a lot of different plans where you have to kind of adapt to what's going on in each given matchup and each given game. That's why I love mid range, and partly why I love this deck because it had so many different plans. And one thing I think it's the best deck in the tournament, even if it didn't win and had one bad matchup. But doesn't compare to my top three, starting with you've got Mail. You've got Harbor Mail. Okay, this is Harbor Mail. Back when it triggered off any spell with surface, whether or not it was cast for a surface cost, and it didn't cost blue. So if you were just playing a surface card at some point, this is a single blue mono sorcery. Surveil one, draw a card, surveil one, draw a card. Completely ridiculous card, paired with pre-nerf Aqua Crew, which was, first of all, it didn't say non-land permanent, and the ability could trigger any number of times. Not once per turn, not once per anything. Just however many times you could cast spells from your graveyard. So you could trigger Harbor Mail with Muddy Water, Reborn Lily, Spiky, or anything with Warden of Depths. You could trigger Aqua Crew with those same cards, but also spiky. Um, the reason I think that this is my top three is this deck was no secret. Everyone knew Harbor Mail was the best card in the format. And there were tons of Harbor Mail decks that ran over the GP, usually in combination of Aqua Crew, often in combination of Warden of Depths. Yeah, this meta was so silly. Let me give you an idea of how silly this meta was. There were matchups where I could see that my opponent had three swamps and two dual lands that tapped for black, and those were their only black sources. And so my game plan was to use Aqua Crew to turn every single black source in their deck into an island so they could no longer cast black spells. That's the kind of gameplay we were doing with pre-nerf Aqua Crew. There was a Jack in this deck that's actually good. even though so even though there were lots of Aqua Harbor Nails, I think this deck was particularly good in the mirror, thanks to its access to Refract, which was a really good card. Omen of Slaughter was well positioned because this deck didn't have a lot of disposable creatures. Callisto was back when Callisto just stole a card every turn, not when a creature you controlled dealt combat damage to them. So it was just this card advantage engine that they had trouble dealing with, didn't die to Muddy Water. Um, Chronicle of Extinction was really good in these matchups. So I was like teched for the mirror, which turned out to be really important. Well, they didn't win this tournament either. Oh, Eager Scavenger. Haven't seen much of this card recently, but I think this card's still pretty good. I guess we have Reaper now, which is the better version. Uh, Invasion's End. This was a great deck for Invasion's End because basically none of its creatures needed to attack to get value, so it could just Invasion's End and keep its entire value engine online while stopping the aggro opponent from killing it. Yeah. Harbor Mail, I think, is the most dominant any card has been of a meta since I've started playing. But maybe it should have been Golems. This is first month of Twiltry, September 2025, 2 months ago. And they're the reason that, like, my previous Golems deck, I think, was the best deck in the field. That was what? I had that number 6. But I think this Golems deck is number 2. For a couple of reasons. First of all, this Golems with a couple of new tools. This is after Unspeaking Titan became a 3/3, but before the 3 or more differently named Golems text. This is when golems got access to Huskforger acolytes, so they could ramp out their golems more quickly, and Reflected Echo to copy their golems. Um, this is, and I think this deck is just better built than that golems deck. Look at this: Ozin's Blessing, getting exactly Unspeaking Titan and Exospheres. Those are the only 2 drops, 4 of each. Absolutely no cruft in this deck, and partly it's like I think this is a better built golems deck than what people were doing back in Error's Kitsuo season, but also because it got all these upgrades, but also because I was the only one on golems somehow. Going Exiled Twiltry, somehow, despite golems being clearly very powerful and getting 2 very strong new tools, no one else ran golems into that GP. And this deck, I felt like it had no bad matchups. It had some like even matchups, like white based control, like what Lee eventually knocked me out with, was kind of an even matchup where they could get ahead of you in value if you kind of fell behind. But everything else, like creature based, like maybe that matchup's at worst like 45% for me. But meanwhile, like if you face against any creature based deck, it's just like 75%, 80% matchup. Turn 2 Unspeaking Titan, turn 3 Reflected Echo it, turn 4 Reflected Echo it. Ozin's Blessing means you almost always get an Unspeaking Titan early in the game. And it's just so hard for any deck to come back from. Look at this by Herald of Awakening with absolutely no ruins anywhere in the deck. That's a kind of tight deck building. No, like, oh, this card could be useful in some situation. No, we're playing cards for specific purposes, and we're not putting bad cards in the deck to justify good cards. I'm really sad I didn't win with this one. I would have gotten a promo Huskforger. First of all, that promo is still outstanding. Um, but this marks the beginning of my losing streak to Lee. This is the first of the 3 tournaments I lost to Lee. It's getting a little old. But what could be better than this? Oh, it's this deck. So this deck's a little weird in that I didn't build it. Every other deck here, I kind of was inspired often by another player, but I kind of refined the deck on my own, usually making it better, sometimes making it worse. This is Persist Conquest. This is from Eternal Month. This is back when Opal Caretaker was put a plus encounter on each creature you control that entered this turn and wasn't cast from your hand. Um. Oh. Oh. What? Why is this? Is this not nerfed? Oh, I thought this thing was nerfed. I guess one. No, right. This is whenever a creature you control enters, if it wasn't cast from your hand, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it actually went infinite with any persist creature, and any sack outlet. So Seductive Gorgon was 2 mana at the time. 2 mana 1/2 didn't scry 1, doesn't matter. 2 mana 1/1, I think, actually. Elder Offerings could also do it. And then Ozin's Blessing searches up the combo. Melon protects it. Selective Truthseeker finds more stuff. Unite the Clans. Oh, Raise Rampage means this deck is very resilient to removal. Unite the Clans was actually the worst card in this deck because what I should have done is put Stark Expanse instead of Downtown Theater. This deck has too many fast lands to be playing a 4-drop, is the long and short of it. And Unite the Clans end up being kind of slow because this deck killed on turn 3 a lot of the time. And so it didn't even need Unite the Clans. Yeah, this deck was silly. Stasis, who built this deck, did not get to play in the December tournament, so I was the only one on this deck. It was head and shoulders the best deck in the field. It ran over everything except for All Who Wander on uh, I think Esper control, some kind of control deck. Basically all answers and exile based removal specifically to beat this deck, and that's where this deck ended. Um, this deck was so messed up. Uh, oh, and even had like Revolutionary Class as the kind of sideboard plan. That actually allowed me to take a game off of that control deck. So yeah, those are the 14 decks I've taken to the 14 GPs I've played in. I think overall I've done a pretty good job. I think of bringing good decks. Like you saw, I think 7 of those 14 times, exactly half the time, I had the best deck in the room, which is a pretty impressive feat. Um, Maybe some of those are my bias, but I think some of those are pretty inarguable. And I'm looking forward to many more time with Revolution. It's been an amazing time since I found the format, and I hope that if you're a player, that you keep playing, keep having fun with it. If you're not a player, that you join in. It's a lot of fun. I hope I can be your guide to why this format is so cool. There's always something undiscovered that you could find to break open the format and annoy the curators with. Before we go, I'm going to do a quick roundup of how many cards did I get nerfed, because that's one way I keep score in this format is if I get a card nerfed, that means I did a good job as a player finding the broken thing. So I'm going to give myself 1 point if I was the primary force getting a card nerf, or half a point if I was the partial force. Okay, Bats. I got Bats nerfed and Relay Stone of Ruin nerfed. Both of these cards got nerfed after this deck, and I was completely responsible for both of them. That's 2. I didn't get anything nerfed out of Esper Control. Out of this deck, I didn't get anything nerfed. Neither, or this one. Out of this deck, I'm going to give myself half a point each for Aqua Crew and Scosa. Um, Sorry, I didn't give myself a full point for Aqua Crew because I was the only. There were plenty of Scosa decks, but I was the one on Aqua Crew, and half a point each for Scosa and Cryptolave, which got nerfed after this, which were more Ricky's things than mine. That brings us to 4. This deck, I'm going to set myself half a point each for Trendsetter, Rib Collector, and Mask Smith. That's 5.5. All of which got nerfed after this. I think Lee takes primary responsibility for this as the person who did really well with this deck and the one who came up with this. Nothing got nerfed out of this. This is second Golems. I'm going to take partial credit for Unspeaking Titan, because there were plenty of Golems players, and that was the nerf after this deck. And full credit for Ragtag Squad, because of all the Golem players, I was the only one on Ragtag Squad. It's already been spoiled that Envoy the Fallen is getting nerfed, and since I had the best Envoy builds, I'm going to take credit for being the one who did that. I think that's like 8. Spore Spawning nerf, I think I can take full credit for that as the one with the best Spore Spawning deck. Reaper of Blossoms, I'll take partial credit for that one. What's that, 9.5? Because Reaper of Blossoms got nerfed, and I was not the only one on Reaper of Blossoms. Plenty of people were doing that. Then this deck, this was the first one. I'll take partial credit for Aqua Crew and Warden of Depths, which got nerfed after this deck, and partial credit for Harbor Mail as well. But full credit for Callisto. I was the only one on Callisto. I think of all the cards nerfed, the one I miss the most is pre-nerf Callisto. That was just such a mirror breaker in so many decks. I'm going to take full credit for the second round of Golems nerfs, because I was the only one on Golems in this GP. And this is the deck that finally got Ozin's Blessing taken out back after so many times. So I'm going to take full credit for that one as well. And lastly, Persist Combo, going to take full credit for Opal Caretaker, Seductive Gorgon, just those 2 cards. Those are the 2 cards that got nerfed off of this deck. But that's not all. because there was also Extraction Ritual, which got emergency banned um, before the February GP, kind of as I was expecting an extraction mission. I'll give myself half a point for that. And Tenki. Tenki has not shown up here because I was one of the big advocates for Tenki. I was by no means the only person to find Tenki, but I think I really refined the Tenki list, played it for one match, and then it got emergency banned. So I'll take half a point credit for Tenki. So I've gotten, by my count, I think about, give or take, 16 cards banned or nerfed in 14 months, which is has a pretty good score. I'm going to see how many more of those I can get in the next year of Revolution Custom Standard. All of you have a great time with Eternal, and good night.